Okay, I'm going to start out by collecting your final 3-paragraph story summary. So if you're getting a little tired of this, phew, it's done. And if you love it, I'm so sorry. Say farewell, bit of fond farewell to your last. Oh, can I do something? Not to be rude, but I'm going to take it out. It just makes it difficult for me. Awesome. 2 is always better than 1. That's not necessarily true. Like 2 broken bones is not better than 1. There's so many instances where 2 is not better than 1. Except apparently 2 pieces of broccoli is better than 1 for you. But not 2 Brussels sprouts.
I realized that Hermes is the god of gymnastics.
Why?
God of
Is he really?
Yeah. He's the god of...
And why would this be?
What? I don't know.
You don't know. Now, did everybody give me, I asked for outlines, so did everybody give me the outline with it?
I'm pretty sure.
Okay, awesome. You know what? 98%, this is a percent I just made up, but I think it might be true. 98% of success in life, I took your paper, Emma. I was going to say 98% of success in life is following instructions. Honestly. Like, just so, and you might think, oh, childhood is so stinky because we have so many instructions to follow. You have no idea. Like, if your parents don't follow the IRS instructions on their taxes, the IRS will knock on their door and say, we're going through all your financial records now because you screwed up. That might not immediately happen, but it does happen. Or if you, I don't know, drive in the exit, bad things can happen. So it's just like life hinges often on following directions. So it seems like when I say, give me your outline, and you don't, it's a very minor thing, and it is in the grand scheme of things, but not following instructions. So anyway, I'm just saying, when the IRS knocks on your door in 20 years, you will remember me and say, Mrs. Ferguson told me to follow instructions, but I didn't do it. Yes, ma'am. Thank you for pointing this out. Preston is one of the people. No, Preston is not. Who else are we missing? Oh, I know. Clara and Julia. Are they, did you see the Beati family? Did anybody see them coming in? Okay. We're going to go ahead and get started, yes. No, I sent her an email telling her to just bring the whole family downstairs and everything, but thank you for volunteering. Let me go ahead and give your papers back. I feel like threatened people is not the word I want to use. Preston is not here, so we will. Oh, and here they are. And did your mom bring everybody downstairs? Is she still upstairs? Did she come into the church? No. Okay. Does she know to come downstairs and not be upstairs? Okay. I sent her an email, but I didn't know if she saw it. So she can just bring everybody downstairs and come instead of being upstairs, because the Bible study's up there, and I wanted it to be quiet up there. So do you need to run back up and just tell her to come downstairs? Just tell her she can bring everybody down here. Thank you. Yeah, wonderful job. Like, I loved everything people did. I don't think I'm asking anybody to do any changes. And this is just to remember, like, you have to really flagrantly disregard everything I say to have to do it again. All right, misspelling something, meh. 1 comma splice, meh. You know what I mean? I'll mark it. Couple of missed punctuation, meh. But if it's just like you didn't put an end mark in any sentence, do you see what I'm going for? So it wasn't meant to be threatening. It was meant to be, because just there are a few people I've had over the years that just don't ever correct it the next time, And I thought maybe if I make them correct it, they will correct it. So I hope everybody is just kind of calm, because I don't think anybody here has to redo anything. Let me give these back. Oh, and I found your similes very entertaining. I think there might be a couple of you that I might have said, I'm not totally sure this is a simile, and that might be Wednesday. I can't remember if it's in here. Anne, That's really, really poorly done. Olivia, you're next. It's very exciting. Julia, you see if you sit farther away from me, then here. Bryn, Juliana. This is fascinating. Is this a little tool that does this? Do you, I love it. I was just staring at it all week. It was amazing. Claire, there you go, ma'am. Okay, now I will come around and collect the papers that you wrote. Oh, except for Clara, it's just Clara and Juliana, because I collected everybody else's. The one that you wrote for this week. Do you have that one? This is fascinating to me. I've never seen this before. A little tool that like bends the paper. There's no staple, but I mean, if you pull real hard, it will come apart, but it's really tight.
Do you need my outline?
I do want your outline, yes, thank you. I've never seen that before. It's very cool. Learn something new every day. All right, let's go ahead, actually, and do our writing first today, because we're going to start something new. Hey guys, conversations. We are going to do something different for a couple of weeks with writing to give you a little break from making up stories. Some of you love making up stories, but we're just going to take a little break because sometimes in life we have to do something other than make up stories. Another form of writing, I mean. And did your parents ever have you do, when I was a little girl, they called it write a report. Does that mean anything to you now, write a report? It means nonfiction. It means tell me about something that's true. Give me information about something that's true. Yes, Brent. Yes, yes. So, because sometimes we need to communicate to someone something that's real. And so we can't really make things up because that's called lying. You know, when you pretend that something is true. When you tell a story, it's not lying, right? Because everybody knows it's a story. But when we're writing nonfiction, we really have to stick to what we're told. And if we just suddenly decide to say that the moon is made of green cheese, as far as I know, it's not. Although they did not drill when they went to the moon. So what's inside the moon? Green cheese, perhaps. But to the best of our knowledge, that's not true. So we are going to do a report. We're going to make half of our outline together, and you guys are going to do the other half of the outline because we're kind of getting used to this whole outline thing. Also, the way we make these outlines is really, really easy. But the subject matter is a little bit behind because it's about Sparta. And we already did Sparta last week, you know. But this will be a good reminder. So the first thing we have to find, if we want to write about something that's true, well, actually, can you tell me, what do I need if I'm going to write a paper about something that's true? Emma?
Information.
I need information. Because I don't tell anyone, but I don't actually know everything. And I feel like maybe you guys don't know everything either. And so if I want to write a report about the moon or mushrooms or whatever, I actually know very, very little about those two things. And so I need information. Lucky you, I have brought you information. You do not have to go find it. Where would you go to find information if I asked you to write a paper on something? Hopefully a library and a book. This is my annual speech. Don't trust anything online.
Yep.
Because anybody can put anything. I could start a website telling people what mushrooms are edible and what mushrooms are not. And I could kill a bunch of people if I wanted to. I mean, don't do that. And I'm not saying that people are running around doing that, but they could. There's no oversight. Anybody can put anything on the internet. So in general, if you look up how far away is the sun on the internet, it's not going to matter if you get some bad information, and it's probably safe. But you gotta remember, anything you get off the internet hasn't been checked by anyone. Yeah, Luke.
I was going to say, could people fake a
It would be, well, nowadays you probably can because of self-publishing. But back in the day, when, when all of this technology didn't exist, a book went through a publishing house. So frankly, if I saw a book was published by the author himself, I might be skeptical. But if I see it's published by Random House or Penguin or whatever, well, they have a team of people that check up on things. Because if they say something false, they'll get sued. So they have a team of lawyers that want to make sure they don't say anything that's not true. Does that make sense to you guys? So that's why. Because you might say, well, anybody could write a book and lie in it. Yeah, but if they've been checked by a team of lawyers that want to make sure that they don't lose money and get sued, they're probably not going to publish false information. One second. Did you find your mom? And did she bring everybody down?
No, she was gonna plant sign.
Okay, she's going to plant sign. Okay, so here is your source. It is from a book. It's a good book, too. All right, 2. I have, could you hand 1 back to Anne? And then I have 3 for you guys. Boom. There you go. There's 1 for each of you. Yes. Okay, so you can see there's quite a bit of information on this paper. Oh, guys, you know what I did? I forgot our prayer. I feel like it's always worthwhile stopping what we're doing. Well, okay, we're just going to pause here and do our prayer. I am sorry to all of you that I forgot. Christ, my Lord, the giver of light and wisdom, who opened the eyes of the blind man and transformed the fishermen into wise heralds and teachers of the gospel through the coming of the Holy Spirit, shine also in my mind the light of the grace of the Holy Spirit. Grant me discernment, understanding, and wisdom in learning. Enable me to complete my assignments and to abound in every good work, for to you I give honor and glory. Amen. Most blessed Lord, send the grace of your Holy Spirit on me, to strengthen me, that I may learn well the subject I am about to study, and by it become a better person, for your glory, the comfort of my family, and the benefit of your church and our nation. Amen. Thank you. All right, now while you got your reading guide open, find an empty page. Somewhere near where we are, Page 8 in mine is empty. Page 10 in mine is empty. Or you can just use a piece of paper if you want to, that's okay. And I would like you to make an outline, again, that looks like this. I'm going to stand on my maps. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to leave a little space, just in case there's so much I want to say I need to add some. And then I'm going to put a 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, and I'm going to leave a little space, then I'm going to write the word clincher. I will tell you what that means. All right, and I'm just going to get out of everybody's way. So how many paragraphs does it appear we're going to do to you? It appears we're going to do 2 paragraphs because remember, each section on our outline is a paragraph. Can you see okay, Juliana? Okay. And we are obviously going to write about Sparta. I told you that. But we're not going to randomly put information about Sparta just all over the place. We're going to think about 2 specific things we might be able to talk about with Sparta. Can you, before we even look at our paper, what is something about Sparta that we could write about?
Their battle plan.
Yeah, like their military, their military, their formation and everything. What else could we write about? Think about the things we talked about last week about Sparta. What else could we talk about? Well, Emma.
Their laws, and we could figure out some way to make it not boring.
Yes, that's a good point, because sometimes writing about the laws sounds boring. But they have 2 kings, and they have this assembly. We could write about that. What else could we write about? the way they lived, the whole black broth and not fancy houses and no real money and things like that. Those are things we could write about. Each of those would be a topic. Each paragraph is going to be a topic in our paper. So I'm not going to have a paragraph where I tell you 2 things about black broth and then something about their weapons and then something else about their kings, because that would be all jumbled. It wouldn't be the same topic. We're going to pick a topic. Actually, we're going to pick 2 topics, and we're going to keep it to that. But here's the thing. I gave you a paper, and it only has a certain amount of information in it. So would everybody take a look? Okay, let's look at this is what I'm calling the front page, the page that says Sparta at the top. All right? And I just see Sparta, the whole top just says Sparta. And then what's it say in the box at the bottom?
Social structure.
Social structure. What in the world does that mean? Do you have any idea what social structure is? That's fancy. It says, in the look at the paragraphs, it tells who's a citizen and who's not a citizen. It's talking about what makes a citizen and what makes a slave and what makes those helots. Remember those poor helots that might just be massacred at any moment? So that's what the box on the bottom tells us about. Flip the page over. What sort of things does this side tell us about? Life in Sparta. Give us another one, Emma.
Spartan government.
Spartan government. And what else? The Peloponnesian League, which we don't even know what that is yet. So I am going to make an executive decision for you this time. But in future papers, you will get to make your own decisions, okay? We're going to do life in Sparta and government in Sparta. And here's why. Because there appears to be tons of information in my source. And I don't know, social structure sounds boring. So we're going to start our outline by writing our 2 topics by the Roman numeral. Life in Sparta, that's topic number 1, and government in Sparta, that's topic number 2. So everything we write in the first paragraph is going to have something to do with life in Sparta. I'm not going to suddenly start talking about Athens in that paragraph. That would be weird, unless I'm comparing Sparta. And everything in paragraph 2 is going to be about the government of Sparta. It's not going to be about black broth. It's not going to be about little boys having their insides ripped out by foxes, as exciting as that is. It doesn't have anything to do with the government of Sparta, so we're going to leave that out. Does that make sense to everybody so far? Everything goes under that topic. Yes, Christian?
What if the way how they execute them is they put a fox in their shirt and then the fox eats the inside of it?
That would be awful. Okay, so I won't.
That would be the government.
I'm just going to tell you this because it will be interesting to you and because I'll forget later. So the Romans, which we're going to talk about second semester, seriously, and I can't even remember, there was some, like, it wasn't treason because they threw you off a cliff for that, but the Tarpeian Rock. There was a crime, and I can't remember what it was. They put you in a sack.
Oh,
Do you remember with a rooster and a snake and some sort of mammal? What was it? And a dog. And then they threw you in the water. They tied you into a sack with these 3 animals and chucked you in the water. And I don't know about you, but I do not want to be in a sack with a dog and a rooster and snake and trying to swim at the same time. So, yeah, so you think, what crime was it again, do you think?
either stealing or killing your father.
I bet it was killing your father. I think they'd be not so bad with stealing. Okay, so let's take a look at the life in Sparta section. We know that all the information on the top half of our page is about life in Sparta. And so here's the rule. I'm going to read a sentence, and you're going to tell me if you think it's interesting or important. Those are the rules. If you think it's interesting and you think it's important, we write it down. If you don't think it's interesting and you don't think it's important, we'll skip it. Because guys, can we fit all of this into our one paragraph? No. Well, maybe if it was a really long paragraph, but I'm just going to say we're not gonna because we're lazy. We're just going to pretend we're lazy. We don't want to write everything. We're just interested in the interesting and important stuff.
I thought this table was like 9 pages.
I know. But, so Emma would probably put everything in. And they put everything in. Yes, there's no need. No need. But if a person wants to, you can put as much interesting and important stuff in as you want. But sometimes if we tried to put a lot into one paragraph, maybe we needed more than one paragraph to say it. Do you know what I mean? Okay, here we go. I'm going to read. You guys are going to, interesting or important, okay? Physical fitness was very important to the Spartans, and only strong and healthy men could become soldiers. Interesting or important?
Yeah, I think so.
It might be important because they're known for being really, like working out and buff, very buff. Okay, so could you give me 3 words that might say that Spartan guys, were really physically fit? Fitness, very important. I like it. Buff is important, yes. Fitness, very important. This seems like maybe not interesting, but very important. Can you guys see over my head at this point? Yeah, I know. Eventually, though, you will not be able to. Okay, we go ahead. Each new baby had to be examined by state officials. If it showed signs of weakness, it was left outside to die.
I feel like that's part of the I don't know if we should write a separate thing.
All right, let's take a vote. Who thinks that's interesting or important?
Would be interesting to say.
Oh, that's, you know what? It's just so sad. People don't want to put it. So here's the option. If you guys want to put it, how would we put that in 3 words? What 3 words could we use?
Baby dies outside.
Okay, but what kind of babies? What?
Weak babies die.
Weak babies die. That works very well. If you think that is interesting, it is kind of interesting, but it's optional. All right, we're going to have plenty of stuff to choose from.
Find something about
Okay, so if you like that, not if you like it. Hopefully you don't like it.
I don't like that.
If you think it's interesting or important. Okay, shh, calm down. All right, I'm going to the second paragraph now. A boy was educated by the state until he was 20. That leaves me very cold. Like, whatever. I mean, basically, kids in the United States are educated. I mean, not you guys, but many are educated by the state until they're at least 16. So, I don't see why that's so great. Then he had to join the army and be elected to one of the military clubs. Is there anything interesting or important there? What did all young men have to do?
Go to know what's war.
Everyone had to join the army. Say it again, Julie.
Forced to join.
Well, but forced join army. I like it. Forced join army. That's rough. Unless you like the army. My son is in the army, so he wouldn't think that was rough at all.
Your son's in the army?
My son is in the army. He's a tank commander. He's currently in Texas on the coast, the Gulf Coast, getting ready to load a bunch of tanks on ships to be shipped to Poland. Because I don't think this is top secret that I'm I don't know. So they're going to be heading, his troop, his squadron is heading to Poland, but he's probably not going. But anyway.
He was in the military, and he also used tanks, and he lives in Texas now.
Oh, my son does live in Texas. He lives in El Paso. My son is stationed at Fort Bliss. My son's there now, except he's not in Fort Bliss because he's in Beaumont loading tanks on ships. Actually, he's taking tanks off train cars currently. The ships aren't there yet. Now I've probably divulged all the military secrets onto the internet. Okay. He lived and ate in the club's barracks and where conditions were very harsh. Well, conditions in the Army are usually harsh, right? I mean, it's not like a cakewalk where you're eating bonbons and watching Netflix all day. Okay, we'll come back if we need to. Let's go to the next square, the next section. Each soldier was allocated land and helots to work it by the state. Everybody had a piece of land and they had their own personal slaves to work it. We like that?
State took care
It
of
was
them.
kind of like a given back then that you had slaves. And then
Yes. So that's kind of a lot of information. Is there any way we could just kind of get to the heart of that in 3 words? They're given land and slaves by the state. State. Okay, I have an idea. I like slaves' land, and the state is good, but we're kind of talking about life in Sparta. So might we know it's the Spartans that are, like, they're getting it from the Spartan government? So what if we say, what were the slaves' land? Given slaves' land. Everyone's given slaves and land, except that's 4 words. Each given, what? Given slaves land. Will we think that the whole city of Sparta has been given slaves and land? Or will we? This is a dilemma.
Might have to do more than.
We might have to use more than one line. How would we say everyone gets land? Except I just said it.
You just said it.
Dudes get land.
Sorry. I'm going to put everyone gets land. And then we could say, do we want to add that they also get slaves to work it for them?
Yeah. If you really want to add a particular number.
We feel everybody seems pretty cold on that. Everyone gets their own piece of land. That's kind of nice. Everyone gets their own land. Okay, and then let's hear more about this land. This left him free to pursue his military career. He supported his family and helped to supply his barracks from the produce of his land. Oh, I heard somebody yawn. That's how boring you thought that information was.
Who yawned?
Wow, instead of being interesting or important, it's like, oh,
We're tired.
it's boring. No, I'm teasing you. Okay, you know what? We're done with the land. Let's move on. Spartan men did not usually marry until they were 30. Do we find that interesting or important?
Most people in Asia don't marry till they're 30.
Yeah, there's a lot of people today that don't. Even then, they spent most of their time at the barracks and just visited their wives and families. Only old men were allowed to live in their homes. Interesting or important? Okay. Okay, I feel like we might hear some good stuff in the next one. Spartan women had to keep fit so they would give birth to strong babies.
That's messed up.
Is it not interesting or important? They trained, let me read the whole things. They trained and competed against each other in athletic events wearing short tunics. Other Greeks were often shocked by this behavior. Is this interesting that Spartan women worked out too? Okay, how could we just in 3 words say some of that?
Women work out.
Women worked out. Good, works for me. All right, so I see we have actually fulfilled our goal of getting 4 interesting or important things. I'm going to read the last paragraph just because there might be something so amazingly interesting or important that we can't leave it out. And then we could add a 5. Let's check it out. I'm going to read the whole thing. Foreigners were not allowed into Sparta. Only the perioikoi, who looked after trade, had any dealings with outsiders. The Spartans did not use coins and usually bartered for goods. First of all, what does barter mean? If I barter,
Barter means.
what does barter mean, Christian?
It's like if someone wants a fish, you have a seashell. And the person really likes the seashell, so you give them a seashell.
That's exactly it. Because we could live without money if we wanted to. And like when your parents pay me for classes, they could just give me like chickens or, I would sew books and chocolate. You know, I could negotiate with your parents for because if you have lots of something that I want and I have something you want, we just trade. And I don't have to pay you money. So, okay. So back to what I read. No foreigners, only merchants dealt with outsiders, and they didn't use coins for money. Is any of that interesting or important? Okay. So we have mixed feelings. Luke, what part of that do you like? What?
Probably trading or bargaining.
Okay. So how could we say in 3 words that they didn't use money, but they bartered for goods? And this is optional, everybody.
Bargain for goods.
They bartered, bartered. Oh, how about this? Bartered, but what did they not use? No coins. And look what I'm going to do. I'm going to do the little, no coins. If that's not interesting or important to you, you can leave it out. Because our goal here is 4 interesting or important things. Here's the goal, guys. 4 to 7. So I'm actually going to have you do the second one on your own. I want you to read bit by bit the government in Sparta box. And if it seems interesting or important, write it down. Try to summarize it in 3 words and write it down. That's it. When you find 4 interesting or important things, you're done. I don't even care if you read the rest. If you are really, really interested in government in Sparta, you can add a 5, a 6, and even a 7 if you want to. But you don't have to. If you got 4, you're good. Does that make sense to everybody? Do you think you can do that on your own without any problem? Just read it and say, is that interesting or important? And this will be the fun thing. Everybody's paragraphs will be different when I get them because you'll choose different things. Now, I need to do one more thing. I need to tell you what this word clincher means. And you might want to keep your outline open because you might want to jot this down, okay? Many of you have heard me give this little speech before, but I'm going to give it again. People aren't very smart, including me. And we easily forget things. You probably know this. Have you ever read something and then you couldn't remember what you just read?
Yes.
Okay, that makes me feel better because sometimes I think it's because I'm old, my brain is old, but I think maybe it's just because I'm a human being and maybe I don't pay good attention. Because, you know, if you really pay attention to something, you do remember it, but sometimes I read and I don't pay attention. So, here's the thing. If we want someone to remember what we say or what we write, you tell them what you're going to tell them, and then you tell them, and then you tell them what you told them. And now they've heard it 3 times. So the tell them what you're going to tell them, we call this a topic sentence. It is the first sentence in a paragraph, and it tells what the paragraph is about. So I will say something like, life in Sparta was very rough. Or, I would never want to have lived in Sparta. Or, it is amazing that everybody didn't run away from Sparta because life there was so hard. Or, I'm going one direction on that, aren't I? We could say, the way of life in Sparta created the strongest people ever known to man. And that seems a little more positive, right?
Is that true? Probably.
Well, I don't know if we can rate strongest, but they're up there. They're probably in the top 5. Yes?
Or we could put in a little both of positives and negatives.
We could. Although life in Sparta made strong warriors, it was still a very hard place to live in, right? And then we have both. So do you see what I did there? I basically told you this paragraph is about life in Sparta. Somewhere I put in there the idea of life in Sparta. So that's the I tell you what I'm going to tell you. And then I turn these into sentences, right? Just like we've been doing for a long time. You know, fitness was very important, so they worked out all the time. Or, you know, I turn those in. Then I get to the end of my paragraph. And I am going to tell you what I told you. I am going to repeat. I'm not going to repeat the same words, but I'm going to, what they say, repeat or reflect. And here's, you could write this down. Repeat or reflect keywords in topic sentence. And it makes a nice deal. It's like a little paragraph sandwich, you know? And it's got a piece of bread on top, and then it's got all the meat and cheese and everything, and then it's got a piece of bread on the bottom. So if my topic sentence was, I like that one that we came together, a little bit of both. Although life in Sparta was very harsh, it produced great warriors. So that's my topic sentence. Then my clincher, my repeating, might be something like this. As you can see, the Spartans were, as you can see, the Spartans lived rough lives, but they produced outstanding fighters. You see, I didn't use the exact same words. In one I said warriors, in another I said fighters, and I said harsh, and then I said rough. And I didn't use the exact same order of my words, but I basically said the same thing again. So for example, if my topic sentence on this is, Sparta had an interesting system of government. And then okay, well, this paragraph's about government. Then my clincher might be something like, although there are many other things we could say about the government of Sparta, this will give you an idea of what it was like. And then I mentioned the words government in Sparta again. So remember, you're making a sandwich. Bread, innards, and it needs another slice of bread. Because how open-faced sandwiches are messy and not fun. Your stuff falls out on your plate.
I love open-faced sandwiches.
What?
I love open-faced sandwiches.
Christian, you always.
Well, do not make an open-faced paragraph.
Okay.
Enclose that meat and cheese and lettuce and tomato and onion and everything with another slice of bread. So here's what I'm going to look for in your papers. 2 paragraphs, easy. A topic sentence and a clincher, right? So you have a sentence at the beginning that says this is what this is about, except don't say this is what this is about. And then a sentence that reminds me somehow. And then you do it again in the second one. And somewhere I want to see a simile. Spartan warriors were as tough as nails. What else did we talk about? Everyone gets a piece of land that is as beautiful as as a field of flowers, sure. Yeah, it might be easier to put it in there. Yes.
Do we need to bring you the outline this time too?
I would.
Like the outline for the government.
I would like to see the outline. Yes.
Just
Thank
for
you.
that.
Bring me the outline. Yeah, if you just want to, like, if you wrote this on a paper you can't tear out, like if you wrote it in the reading guide, you can just do the other outline on another piece of paper. Or if it's stuck in your reading guide and you can't hand it in, I can just look at it. I just say, hey, here's my outline, and I'll look at it. I don't even have to collect it.
Or you could just take it out of the reading guide.
Sure. I also wanted to add alliteration. I'm going to look for alliteration. What is alliteration? Emma.
3 words with the same sounding first letters in one sentence.
Yes. And they don't have to be in a row. So at least 3 words that, I'm about to do it, that start with the same sound. And they're relatively close together. So I say in the same sentence. I did it again. I say in the same sentence.
Again.
Apparently, I'm just full of alliteration today. Remember, it doesn't mean they're spelled with the same letter. It means they start with the same sound. So in other words, ceiling and Santa alliterate. even though ceiling starts with a C. Likewise, cat and kite alliterate, even though cat starts with a C. C is crazy. We also have G that does, multitasks. Sometimes it sounds like J. Sometimes it sounds like G. So if like a gigantic juggler, I doubt that that's going to come into your paper this week. I don't think there's gigantic jugglers in the Spartan government. But they alliterate, even though one starts with a J and one starts with a G, because it's the same sound. Does that make sense to you guys? So that's what we're looking for. And I never told you this, but you might notice that on your papers, whenever I find your simile, I've just been putting an S out here, and that means simile. So what you could do for me, type it out there. Just grab your paper after you print it out and put it there. And it helps me if you do it on the side and not in the paper, because it just blends in with all the other stuff. But because what I do is I pick up your paper and I look, oh, SA, they did it. And if I don't see the things in the margin, I'm like, okay, I don't know whether they did it or not. Do I tell them to rewrite it? What if they did it and I missed it? Do you see what I mean? And so if you just put it out in the margin, like I said, you don't have to work on your computer and try to type it in the margin and all of that. Just print it out and get a pencil and just say, okay, where's my simile? Where's my alliteration? Done. Doesn't have to be neat, just as long as I can find it. All right, does that make sense? So one more time. 2 paragraphs. Topic sentence clincher, like your sandwich bread, with simile and alliteration on Sparta.
I think I put an alliteration in the paper.
I think you did.
And I think I marked it, so you don't have to.
See, you were ahead of the game. I think I marked it on you. I think I said something like, "Oh, you already did the alliteration. Awesome." Okay.
On this paper?
On the one I gave you, I think. Oh,
No, you
maybe
marked
not.
that
Maybe not.
You marked that I marked the simile.
Oh, okay.
But I mean the paper I just gave.
Oh, okay. All right. Let's take a look at our questions for this week on page 9. Oh, and I got to get my poems out so I don't forget. Also, before we get started on that, do you remember that last week I sort of teased you with a Greek thing, and then I took it away because I brought the packet for my Wednesday kids? So I actually have it now. So this is not for you to do anything with. This is just for kicks. I thought you might like to see the Greek alphabet, since we're talking about the Greeks. And so it tells you what the lowercase and uppercase ones look like, what the letter is called, alpha, beta. That kind of clues us in by why we call it the alphabet, because the first 2 letters are alpha and beta. The alpha, beta, yes.
The last letter is.
And what is it?
Omega.
Omega, because Jesus said, I'm the alpha and the omega, the beginning and the end, right? And then it tells you how it's pronounced. So, for example, you might say, well, I know how A is pronounced, but we say a, a, like which one? And it tells you it's as in father. So it gives you a word, because we crazy English speakers say the same letter different ways. And then on the back, I have the Lord's Prayer in Greek. And if you want to, this is something that I recommend the internet for. You can just like Google, YouTube, somebody reading the Lord's Prayer in Greek, if you want to hear somebody read it. Online, usually they don't use classical pronunciation. It would be the way people in Greece speak today. But if you want to hear it read, hear what it sounds like. Anyway, this is just for your fun and interest. All right. Again, can you pass one back to Anne? And then can you leave one in front of Julia? Boom, boom, boom. There we go. There's 3 for you guys. You will run into a lot of these letters when you get into higher math. You know, a lot of these letters are used for particular, in formulas or things like that. Maybe you already know about pi, 3.1415, and then it goes on forever, but I don't know the rest of it. All right. Today we read about Athens. Who was the most famous king of the early kings of Athens, and what did he do to become famous? Emma.
Theseus?
Theseus. And conveniently, even though I didn't plan it that way, I mean, I did plan it, but you know, I didn't know I was, you read the story about Theseus in the Greek myths in the same week that you, and I didn't even know this was going to happen. And so what did he do? Why is he awesome? Yeah. Yeah, because he killed the Minotaur. What's the Minotaur?
This huge beast, half man, half bull monster.
Half man, half bull monster that eats human beings alive. That is really messed up. It's not good at all.
It's Greece.
Some of their stories are a little messed up.
Yeah, all Greece.
Theseus. So was Theseus a real guy? I don't know. Do I believe he killed something that was half man and half bull?
No.
Personally, I don't believe that. Although I can't prove it didn't happen. But I think it's strongly unlikely. But does that mean he wasn't, hey gentlemen, does that mean he wasn't a real person? No.
Yeah, I think so. Like he killed something.
Yeah.
related to bull.
Like it could have been a bull. Like the, you know, I find it interesting that a lot of these Greek myth stories, they involve an animal rampaging the countryside. Have you noticed this happen? Like there's a wild boar rampaging and then Meleager goes out and you know, he's going to fight it. Or there's a wild bull that's, I don't know.
Maybe they had a lot of wild bulls.
They had a lot of wild animals running loose. So if you went out and killed a particularly vicious wild animal, you know, over time, people could tell the story, and the wild animal could become crazier and crazier.
Like when you catch fish, they get bigger and bigger.
Yeah, like I caught a fish that was this big. Like it was really this big, but it becomes this big. In your mind, you think it's that big. So do you remember that we talked, remember the Minotaur lived in Crete. Just to remind you, I'm going to just have to hold my map up. Do you see Crete at the bottom of the map? It's long and skinny. The Minos was living in Crete. He was the king of Crete. So Theseus got sent there. And do you remember what we saw pictures of from Crete? Pictures of a maze-like thing. And what were they doing for sport, apparently? Bulls. There were pictures of bulls. So there was some sort of bull thing going on in Crete.
Aries.
Unclear what the bull thing was. What did you want to add, Emma?
Well, well, I think I mentioned this one time. The bull is the secret animal of Aries, so like it could be men, like and you know born Aries and stuff, so they could just be like making tribute or something, preparing for war in honor of Aries.
Yes. And then over time, it gets sort of shaped, morphed, twisted into this story about this half man, half bull. We don't know. So, interestingly, I wanted to read this because I did think it was very interesting. On page 98, it says, much later, it says, long centuries after, Cimon, an Athenian general, and by the way, this isn't in the times of Greece that are distant mists of time that we don't know about. This is in historical times. Cimon took possession of the island in which it was said Theseus had been buried. Cimon, and now I'm about to read a quote from a biography, Life of Theseus. This was written 1800 years ago, okay? Cimon had a great ambition to find out the place where Theseus was buried, and by chance, he spied an eagle on a rising ground when on a sudden it came into his mind, as it were by some divine inspiration, to dig there and search for the bones of Theseus. There were found in that place a coffin of a man of more than ordinary size, and a brazen spearhead and a sword lying by it. all of which he took aboard his galley and brought with him to Athens. Upon which the Athenians, greatly delighted, went out to meet and receive the relics with splendid processions and with sacrifices, as if it were Theseus himself returning alive to the city. His tomb became a sanctuary and refuge for slaves, and of all those of mean condition, that means like poor people, that fly from the persecution of men in power, in memory that Theseus, while he lived, was an assister and protector of the distressed, and never refused the petitions of the afflicted that fled to him. I find this very interesting. Plutarch, who wrote that, says that Cimon, and this would have been like in the 400s BC, went to the place where they said Theseus was buried, and he found a coffin and somebody, he says, of more than ordinary size. It doesn't mean he was 20 feet tall or anything. Like more than ordinary would be 7 feet, 8 feet. I mean, does anybody know how tall the tallest basketball players we have are?
7 foot, like 3 foot, 4, 5.
So when we say somebody was 7.5 feet tall, like that's not even crazy. We have people today that are 7.5 feet tall. Yeah, Grace.
Back then, they were most likely shorter, so somebody of like higher than us could be our size.
Possibly. Do we know why we think people were shorter? I don't know if that's I've heard that, but I don't know if it's been proven by anyone. I mean, they found lots of old skeletons, so I think they could prove it.
Armor and stuff, and whenever they look at the armor, it's like really small.
Okay. So that's a really good point. If that's true, that like 6 feet was not normal back then, and you had someone who was 6'2" or something like that, they would be practically a giant. Yeah, Christian, what were you going to add?
Maybe they didn't eat as much because we have a lot more food.
We do have a lot more food. Unfortunately, for us today, I know we have a lot of food we really like and think it tastes good, but most of our food isn't very good for us anymore. Do you know what I mean? They kind of do things to, you guys know this, I won't give a speech about it. So for a while, like people ate much better, and now we're sort of turning into people who don't eat well anymore. We eat a lot, but we don't get a lot of nutrients out of it because, I mean, Checkers is delicious, don't get me wrong. I love me some Checkers as much as anyone else, but it really doesn't do anything for my body, Nothing good anyway, except makes me happy, but it makes me other things too.
Jersey makes me.
But here's what struck me. Have you guys ever read somewhere else in the ancient world where it talked about people of more than ordinary size of long ago? Goliath was more than ordinary size. Anywhere else? Anything else? Hercules, maybe. We don't know a lot about his size. Apparently, he was super strong. Samson would be a parallel in the Bible. I don't think it ever tells you how large Samson is. He's just really strong. You got one?
In some of the books that I read, he always towered over everyone.
Oh, okay. You know what I was thinking? 2 things. First of all, in Genesis, it says that in Genesis chapter 6, it has this weird passage where it talks about the sons of God went to the daughters of men and had children with them. And nobody really knows what that means. A lot of people think it means like demonic entities had children with human women. But we're not sure. But anyway, here's what it says after that. And there were giants in those days, heroes of old, men of renown. That's what it says. And every time I read that, I think, that's like Theseus and Heracles and these heroes of old, men of renown. And they were of more than ordinary size. And then that was before the flood. Then even after the flood, apparently there's some genetic strain that came from Noah and his wife, because what did the Israelite spies who were sent in to spy out the promised land, what did they come back and report to Moses? Who was living in the land? Yeah, we looked like grasshoppers to them. I think that was highly exaggerated. I think they just didn't want to go in. But I don't think they totally made it up. apparently they felt like the Canaanites were much bigger than they were, like of more than ordinary size. So a lot of people read history like that. You know, they'll read that and say, that's a bunch of bunk. They just made that stuff up. I don't know. We have 7 foot whatever basketball players today. And like Grace said, if people were of not as big a stature back then, it makes perfect sense that somebody who's 6.5 feet tall might be a hero of old, more than ordinary size. But 7 feet isn't crazy, you know. Anyway, let me see if I wanted to say anything else about Theseus. Let's move on to the next chapter, or the next question. We talked about this last week, I think. What is an oligarchy? It's a form of government, and in that form of government, who gets to be in charge?
The people.
Not all of the people. And by the way, in my book, it says section 2, the rule of the few, oligarchy. So it kind of tells you who rules?
Only the cool people.
The rule of the few. Is it the rule of the one? No, because we call that monarchy, right? If you have a king or a queen or an emperor or whatever. And it's not a democracy, which is the rule of everybody. It's the rule of the few. Which few? Christian, I think you were going here. Which few do you think get to be in charge?
The richest
Yeah.
in the city.
Might be the richest. It might be the most powerful. Do you think that it makes you a good ruler to be rich or powerful?
No.
Not, yeah. If it's the smartest and the wisest, I like that. That could be really, really good. Because, you know what, this isn't I don't know if you'll think I'm not very nice for saying this. Is everybody equally smart? You know, I'm sorry, but everybody's not equally smart. It doesn't make you a bad person to not be equally smart, right? But if we want to pick the people to lead us, maybe we want to pick the smartest and the wisest. And maybe that's not everybody. So it sounds, as Americans, we think, oh, that's wicked to just choose a few people to get to be in charge and no one else has a say. But it isn't really wicked if you choose the best. So this is what Athens did first. Dorothy Mills tells us some steps. She said, first of all, they had assemblies, right? The people got together and discussed things. They couldn't make the decision, but they did have a discussion about it. It wasn't like the government was going to say, stop that discussing things. We will tell you what to do. Just shut up and obey. It wasn't like that. And then the second step, she says, was choosing a few people to rule. But who gets to choose? The people get to choose a few people to rule. So you see, they're inching towards we're going to rule ourselves. Tell me about Solon. Who is Solon and what did he do for Athens? And he was very similar to a Spartan leader we saw. Tell me about Solon.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Nobody wants to take it.
Reform the government.
He reformed the government. Does anybody remember what was wrong with the government that he needed to reform it?
Wasn't it kind of just falling apart?
Well, yes. Christian, what did you say? I didn't hear.
The government before that was wicked.
Well, yeah, wicked in what way? Do you remember?
I kind of forgot.
That's okay. Let me read this. It says, now nobles, the nobles, listen to what I'm about to read. The nobles had acquired their power because of their opposition to the rule of one man. They said, we don't want one king. We want a group. Great. The noblemen will rule. But when the authority had been placed in their hands, they proved themselves equally unable to be just towards all, and their rule became as intolerant as that of the kings. Because the rulers, the few that they put over them, started abusing them. So everything you guys said, Bryn and Christian, you're dead on, yes. Have you guys ever heard the phrase? This is kind of a proverb. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. When you get to be in charge, it tends to make people get bossy. And you tend to want to do things for your friends that you don't do for everyone. And nobody likes that. What if you're not the friend of the person in charge? What if you go to court and the other person automatically wins because they're friends with the people in charge? We would say, that's terrible. That's not just, we would say. And that's what was happening. So Solon came along and he said, we need to fix things. He said, first of all, a bunch of you have gone into debt, like you're being sold as slaves because you're in debt, because the rich people have been abusing the poor. I am canceling all the debt. Clean slate. Now, if I'm poor and I owe money, I'm very happy now. If I'm rich and people owe me money, I'm not so happy because I'm never going to get that money. But hopefully I see that it's necessary, that my city is falling apart and we have to do something about it. Solon did that, and he set up a system of government in which, an assembly met, there were rulers, but everybody got a say on what laws were passed. Do you remember the Spartan leader that did that for Sparta? Yeah. Lycurgus. And it's interesting because Dorothy Mills says, Solon enjoyed the experience of traveling and seeing new things. Just like Lycurgus, we said, who traveled around and saw how people ruled themselves. So the other problem that there was in Athens is this. There was a lawgiver before Solon named Draco. Not Draco Malfoy, another Draco. And Draco's laws were awful. In other words, there was like death penalty for everything. Death penalty for everything. If you steal a chicken, death penalty. If you, I don't know, lie about something, death penalty. Yeah. If you murder someone, death penalty. And finally somebody said, Draco, how is it fair that someone who steals a loaf of bread and someone who murders someone get the same punishment? And he said, well, the guy who steals bread deserves the death penalty. The guy who murders someone deserves worse than the death penalty, but I can't think of anything worse to do to him. Yeah. So sometimes even today we call laws draconian. If you ever, sometimes the newspaper, news media will use the draconian laws. It means really, really harsh. It doesn't necessarily mean everybody gets the death penalty, but it just means harsh laws. This was, as one of you said, it's eating up the population, right? If everybody's got death penalty, but it made life miserable. And Solon says, okay, done that. We can't live that way. So he relieves the debtors. He changes Draco's laws, and then he said, I am going to go away. I'm going to go traveling. The story is that every day Solon would get up and somebody's knocking on his door. Solon, why didn't you do this in your law? Solon, why don't you change this? Solon, I don't like this law. So finally, they say, Solon got so fed up with it, right? He's like, you know what? I'm taking an extended vacation because I'm a little tired of this. So you got to do one thing for me, just like Lycurgus. I'm going away. Don't change anything till I come back. You got to promise me. And so, but he didn't go off and kill himself, like they say Lycurgus did. He went and traveled, and he went all over the world. And a famous story, by the way, Solon wasn't just a lawgiver. He was also a poet. We have some of his poetry. And he is known as one of the 7 wise men of Greece. Did you know there were 7 wise men of Greece? 7 philosophers and thinkers that are just noted as being incredibly wise. Solon was one of the 7 wise men of Greece. And the very wise story about Solon is this. He went across the sea, and he went to Sardis over here. Sardis is in Lydia, and it was then ruled by a man named King Croesus. And King Croesus was super wealthy and awesome, and he knew it. So he showed Solon all his stuff. And he said, hey, Solon, bet you've never seen anybody more fortunate and blessed than I am. I bet I'm the most blessed and happiest person in the world. Who do you think is the happiest person in the world, Solon? And Solon said, well, there's this guy I knew back in Athens. You know, he had just enough. He didn't have enough wealth to make him greedy, but he didn't have so little that he was in poverty. And he had good children. And then he went out bravely to battle, and he died bravely for his country, and everybody honored him. And Croesus goes, what? You think this guy's more blessed than me? He's like, what? Who's the second most blessed? Solon says, well, once upon a time, back in Greece, there's this priestess, and she had 2 children, sons, Cleobus and Biton. And she had to get to the temple for a sacrifice, and she couldn't walk because that was the rule. She had to be taken in a cart. But the oxen that were supposed to pull the cart weren't there. And she said, what am I going to do? And Cleobus and Biton said, don't worry, Mom. We'll hitch ourselves up to the cart, and we'll run with the cart, and we'll take you to the temple. And they did, and they got there in time, and everybody's just saying, oh, she has such good sons. What good sons they are. And she goes into the temple of the goddess, and she says, oh, goddess, my sons are so awesome. Would you please give them the greatest blessing? And so they went about their day, and they had dinner, and then the 2 sons just laid down in the temple to sleep, and they died in their sleep. They never woke up, because a painless death at the height of one's glory was the greatest blessing. Okay, at this point, Croesus is like, I give up. You're a nutcase. Am I not the most blessed and happy person you've ever seen? You're comparing me with this? And Solon said, well, here's the thing. You never really know what's going to happen, do you? Because you're happy right now, and things are awesome for you right now, but something might happen, and you could end your life miserably. We can't ever say somebody's happy until they've finished the story, until they're dead. Then we know. This is a pretty wise thing, and as a matter of fact, not long after this, Croesus got into a war, and it didn't go well for him. And things did go badly for him later. We'll talk about that in a couple weeks, maybe next week. Anyway, that's Solon, a wise man who's also a lawgiver and a poet to boot. Okay, let's talk about tyrants. Were the Greek tyrants always bad rulers? And by the way, what do we usually mean when we call someone a tyrant? Is that a compliment? No. Do we think they're nice, or do we think they're mean? Yeah. So tyrant isn't a good thing. It could be literally like a ruler of a country as being a tyrant, or sometimes we say, oh, Mrs. Ferguson is such a tyrant because she makes us put similes in our papers.
No, I could do that anyways.
Thank you. Thank you. But in Greece, was tyrant bad? Do you remember?
Not always.
Not always. Dorothy Mills said some of the tyrants actually passed some really good laws, beneficial laws. Tyrant for them just meant you took power and you weren't supposed to. Power didn't belong to you, but you took it, sort of illegally. So that's bad. That's a black mark against you right there. But once you got power, it doesn't mean you abused people or bossed them around or anything. Well, Solon was gone, gallivanting around the country. A guy named Pisistratus became tyrant in Athens. And Pisistratus' story is hilarious. I mean, well, it's a little sad and hilarious at the same time. So he was actually a relative of Solon's, and he decided he wanted to take over. So here's how he does it. You got to listen to the story because it's great. He hires some thugs to beat him up. They go out of the city, they beat up Pisistratus. Then he comes in, and he's like bleeding and black eye and stuff. He's like, oh, you know, there are people that really don't like my politics and my family, and I'm in danger. You need to give me some bodyguards. He says, oh, poor Pisistratus. So they gave him this group of like 30, 40 guys to always surround him and protect him. So now he's got his own little personal army, right? He's got a bodyguard army. It's all set up, but he got the bodyguard, right? So he uses them to take over. He uses the thugs, right, his bodyguards, to take over. Well, they eventually eject him out of the city, throw him out. But he wants to come back. This happened 2 or 3 times, but this is the funnest time.
Is fun a word?
No, it's not really. I think so.
The most fun.
Yeah, the most fun. It could be a word. Maybe it's an optionally okay word now. We'll have to, yeah, that'd be your homework, Christian. You can find out funnest as a word. He hires a woman who's particularly tall and beautiful to stand in a chariot all dressed up like Athena. And he brings her into the city in the chariot, and she announces to Athens that Athena wishes you to accept Pisistratus as your ruler. And they do.
That's bad.
And they do. And I just, like, if I could get a time machine, one of the many, many things I would like to witness is her coming into the city. And I'm like, I want to ask them, do you really think that's Athena? Don't you know that's just a particularly pretty girl who's like tall? They did. They listened to him. And Solon came back and he found Pisistratus in charge. He said, what's the deal, people? I told you not to change anything. And what's the... And Pisistratus is all, you know, I mean well, Solon. It's not like I'm being mean to anybody. I'm a good ruler. I should rule. He's like, yeah, but you're not supposed to. So they say that Solon, in his old age, got so sick of what was going on in Athens that he just went home and closed the door and just like read books and stuff. He's like, I'm done with you. I'm so done with you. If you cannot see what is good for you, I don't know what more to do with you. Pisistratus eventually died, and he left power to his sons Hippias and Hipparchus. But somebody assassinated Hipparchus. Hippias and Hipparchus weren't as good as their dad. Like, they weren't as nice as their dad. This happens over and over in the Bible, too. Like the high priest Eli's sons, it says, weren't very good. Samuel, you know, when the people asked for a king, they said, you're old and your sons don't walk in your ways. Aaron's sons, Nadab and Abihu, got zapped to death by God for offering sacrifices however they wanted. Like, not the way God said. So this happens. So somebody assassinated Hipparchus, and Hippias ran away, and I will tell you where Hippias ran to later. Now, for next week, this is in the email, we are skipping the next chapter. I told you, I'm going to tell you like in 3 minutes what's in the next chapter, okay? We're skipping the next chapter, and we're going, if your chapters are like mine, chapter 8, it's called The Beginning of the Persian Wars. This is some exciting stuff, I'm telling you. This is one of the most famous wars in the history of the world. Yes? No, it's the next section in your reading guide. And the next section should say chapter 8. Yes, it does. And it has the page numbers. But in case those don't match up, it's called The Beginning of the Persian Wars.
Question.
Yes.
Can you skip a chapter? Like there's Athens and then there's something and then you skip?
Just read the
I
one.
just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, just read the one called The Beginning of the Persian Wars. Because we're going to talk about the Ionian colonies. That's the next chapter right now. Okay, let me just get out of everybody's way so you can... You know, we are just going to have not a lot of time for Theseus and Heracles, yes. Yes. Yes, because you have to do the second outline. We didn't do the second one. So, yes. Okay, so here's what is in the chapter we're skipping. I just didn't know that it was, oh, that's not the one I want. It's like, why is that so, well, do you remember I just told you guys that Solon went across here to Sardis to visit Croesus? Do you see how many islands there are here? Well, there's islands everywhere, right? There's lots of big islands over here, and then there's towns over here, particularly Miletus, you might take note of. These towns were Greek. Eventually, as the Greek city-states grew, they had bigger populations. Okay, let me put two things together. I'll tell you two things, and then you tell me what happens next. There were lots more people, but the same amount of food. What happens next?
People start moving.
Yeah, people start moving. Well, because I'm not going to stay here and die if I'm smart. So we're going to start moving. We're going to start sending groups of people out and forming colonies. And usually these colonies, well, it's like the American colonies, right? We still were loyal to England, at least for a good long time. And they were loyal to the city-state that sent them out. So if Corinth sent out a colony, it was our colony, they said at Corinth, like, and it followed Corinth's laws and rules, or if Athens sent out a colony. But the important thing to know is that this whole coast over here was full of Greeks. And not only that, but now we get our bigger map out. Not only this coast over here, but all around here are Greek colonies, and even southern Italy and Sicily. Do you see how it's not very far? Greece is not very far from Sicily and Italy here. So Greeks went all over these places, and now this whole area has become Greek. Because have you ever wondered why the Romans had so many of the same gods as the Greeks? It's because the people in Italy met the Greeks who came there to form colonies. And so they borrowed a lot of stuff from Greece. And then eventually Rome's going to conquer Greece, right, and absorb more of it. But even way back then, they knew about Zeus and Hera. They called them different names, but they knew about them because there were Greeks living close to them. So this is going to come up, important later in history, but that's basically that whole chapter. That Greek cities sent out colonies, and that whole area was just full of Greek cities, bringing all the stuff, bringing their poetry and bringing their music and bringing their language and bringing their different government systems all over that area. It all became Greek. All right, so we're skipping that chapter because that's basically the chapter. And then we'll head straight into the Persian Wars because that's exciting. Are there any questions? So you're going to finish that outline and write 2 paragraphs. And it's going to have sandwich, topic, sentence, clincher. It's going to have a simile and alliteration somewhere in it. And you're going to read this chapter. And there's one more thing you're going to do, and then we're going to read a couple poems, and we're going to talk about Heracles and Theseus briefly. Next week, we are starting this book. This may be the most famous story in the history of the world. This story is 3,000 years old. Maybe a little longer. It is really, really famous, but it's got a lot of characters in it. So, in your reading guide, on page 12, I made you a chart. This is a war between two groups, obviously Trojan War, the Trojans and the Greeks. And sometimes it's hard to remember who's on which side. So I have the major characters of the Greeks and the major characters of the Trojans for you. If you don't like my chart, your book in the very beginning has 1, 2. the chief characters. It's got the gods. It's got the Greeks. Tells you who everybody is. And it's got the Trojans. Just like at the beginning of a play, you know, the list of characters in a play. So you've got two different places to look to say, okay, who is this Menelaus guy again? All right, I put him there and he's in here. And after you get into the plot, it's not a problem. It's like one of those books that you read that just has a bunch of characters and they introduce them all to you at the beginning. And you kind of have to read the book a little while to sort of sort out the characters and figure out who's who. I want you to read from the Trojan War, parts 1 and 2. Parts 1 and 2 of Trojan War. In my book, and I suspect all of your books are going to be like mine, it's pages 3 to 71. And don't worry, it sounds like a lot of pages, but it's just like that other book. It's got pictures, and the print is big. Like 65 pages goes really fast. Also, if you read 15 or 17 pages a day, you'd have it easily done in 4 days. And it's not really that much. Like I bet in 15 or 20 minutes you could read, because it's pretty easygoing and it's got blank pages and pictures and stuff. So read parts 1 and 2. Okay, while you write that down, I'm going to treat you, because I know this is the highlight of your day, to our wonderful poems. I have chosen two, especially. We have Solon. Solon was wise, Solon was fair, the ruler Athens needed. He made good laws, he helped the poor, his wise reforms succeeded. He gave the poor the right to vote, demanded courts be just. The father of democracy, he earned the people's trust. It wasn't funny, but it was informative. It was important, maybe not interesting. Okay, but the myth of the Minotaur. And then we'll spend the rest of our time discussing Theseus and Heracles. The Minotaur, do you want to see? That's the bad thing about pictures sometimes. Like, oh, that's not the way I pictured him. The Minotaur was a monster with nasty personal habits. A man with the head of a bull, he ate people as if they were rabbits. To keep him relaxed and quite cheerful, they didn't have antidepressants. Each 9 years, the people would feed him a meal of 14 adolescents. He lived in a maze called a labyrinth, according to this ancient fable. The Minotaur found it quite cozy, though it hadn't been wired for cable. Then Theseus entered the maze, and though he expected resistance, he took out his magical sword and ended the monster's existence. Except he didn't really have a magical sword. I don't know why that's in the poem. What did Theseus have? What did he have to help him? He had a string. And how did the string help him? Did he strangle the Minotaur with the string? What is the string for? No, but it's just a string. But you get lost. That's the problem. You have two problems in the labyrinth, right? One is you're going to be eaten. But even if you manage to hide from the Minotaur, who I assume has a decent sense of smell and can sniff you out, you will not be able to find your way to the door, and you will eventually die of starvation in the labyrinth. So where did he get this string? Say it, Julia. What was it? From a girl. Why did this girl give him a string? And why did she want him to defeat it? Because he's dishy and dreamy. I hope he doesn't die. So it just so happens that this girl, Ariadne, was the king's daughter. The king who was sentencing them all to death, which is a conflict of interest. It's problematic. So she says, I'm going to give you this string. By the way, the old English term for a string or a thread like that was this word, a clue. And eventually, we turned that word into this word. We spelled it different. And so if you like to read mysteries, you will know that the detective follows clues right? To find the answer to the mystery, to find out who stole the last donut or whatever the mystery is, right? And I'm looking, oh, the clue is, Amelia has crumbs on her shirt. She must have stolen the last donut. And that's what clue comes from. It's originally a string that you follow. It's originally Theseus's string. He followed the clue and he found his way out of the labyrinth. So we already talked about Theseus. He amazingly conquers the Minotaur. Olivia Coolidge's Theseus story was very, very, Theseus is awesome. But there is another version. Do you know, in some versions, Theseus just dumps Ariadne on the island. He just ditches her and sails off while she's asleep because he doesn't really want her. He just wanted her help. Yeah, Christian.
The god of wine married her after.
Yes, Dionysus, the story, Dionysus or Bacchus came along, and which always redeems it a little bit, but still, that's rough. That's harsh. To just use someone and sail off with them and then ditch them while they're asleep, and she wakes up and the ship is gone. That's rough. So I don't know, maybe that might change your opinion of Theseus a little bit if we do that version. Tell me about Heracles. Why does Heracles have so much work to do? Yeah, Christian.
It's because he killed his wife and his sons.
He did. And why would he do a thing like that?
Because people say that Hera made him do that.
And why does Hera hate him?
Well, he's the son of Zeus.
Yeah, because she's married to Zeus, and Zeus isn't supposed to have a bunch of children with other women. That's sort of point one on being married, is you don't do that. And so Hera had it in for Heracles, big time. So Heracles is known to us for doing these amazing feats of strength. You guys know them. You probably, who here never had heard of any of these labors of Hercules before this book? Is there anyone who had never heard of it before? Someone? Okay. He's amazingly strong. In fact, he can go down to Hades and bring up the three-headed dog Cerberus and deliver him to King Eurystheus, who's making him do all this stuff. And Eurystheus freaks out because it's Cerberus. My favorite, I'm just going to tell you my favorite because it's weird. There was a guy who had stables and a bunch of horses, and he never cleaned the stable. And they just pooed and pooed and pooed and pooed, and it just piled up. And that's disgusting. And so his job was to clean out the stables in a day. I don't know. You guys, here's what you can think about this week. Would you rather have to go to Hades and haul up Cerberus, or would you rather clean out stables that have been pooed in for decades? Oh my goodness, I don't know.
So if I was as strong as Hercules, I'd probably go down to Cerberus.
Did Hercules only use his strength to get that done? Did he use some intelligence? Because what did he do?
He blocked up the stream and it overflowed and washed all the poop.
Yeah, he just diverted a stream and made it flow through the stable and washed it all out, and then he re-diverted the stream. Which you got to be pretty strong to like dig new channels for streams and things like that. But it's pretty smart too. So Heracles wasn't stupid, but he's kind of known more for his brawn than his brains. But I will leave you with a famous story about Heracles that came from much later in time. They say once upon a time, Heracles was walking along and he came to a crossroads. And he didn't know which path to take. And there were two voices that came to him. And one said, Heracles, you should take this path because it's the path that leads you to Party Town. And you can drink, and there's tons of women, and you can have fun, and it's awesome. And then this other voice said, Heracles, you should pick this path because it's the path of virtue, and it will make you good and wise, and the gods will love you. And so they say Heracles picked the path of virtue, even though he was questionable sometimes. But Anyway. All right, I will let you guys go. Start the Trojan War, write the paper, and read about the beginning of the Persian Wars, and I will see you next week. Have a good week.